Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, veuillez accueillir, please welcome Carla Gohin, Carlo Purassanta en conversation avec In Conversation with Shalene Gupta.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here. Now, that was a tough act to follow, and we were thinking about singing to you about data ethics, but we decided you'd be a lot happier if we just talked. So today, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Carla Go, the CTO and Vice President of Research and Innovation at PSA Group, and Carlo Purassanta, the President of Microsoft France, here to talk to us about the ethical challenges of managing data security, ownership, and data sharing. So Carla, set the stage for us. How is data impacting your company today?
Well, in fact, I think that we are all aware, and those 2 days have, I think, also highlight that point. Data digitalization is probably one of the major technological disruptions our automotive industry is facing now, among, of course, electrification, among connectivity, and among, of course, autonomous driving. One key point regarding data is that it brings new opportunities throughout the whole value chain of an automotive car maker. Of course, when we think about the data that vehicles are just carrying, generating, just 1 or 2 figures, probably you may know already, but today and the next generation of our cars, connected and autonomous ones, per second will generate more than 15 megaoctets of data, and within 1 second. So it's just, I would say, quite impossible to think about all these data that will be generated and how we will use it, of course, to create value, not only for creating new services for our customers, but also for optimizing our manufacturing processes, optimizing our marketing processes, optimizing, I would say, also the overall added value we can provide to our customers.
Now, Carlo, how are you seeing data impacting mobility from your perspective?
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would build on what Carla has been saying. So data is probably the number one lever for value creation right now. Not the only one, but the new number one coming into our businesses. Not only the quantity of data, but also, let's say, the passion that every company has to set up and define and organize with their organization on understanding what data is available, what data can be available, and how to use it. I remember this study that was issued a few years ago that was saying that not only companies that are using well data are more profitable, I mean, all the indicators we can have in a P&L, but what was striking to me is that the first quartile and the bottom quartile of this classification of data usage, the companies that were using the data the best, they were manipulating 40 to 50 times more data in the same industry than the others. So it really means that this is creating, new capabilities that over time will become absolutely key to survive. So we're talking about survival of organizations. What I'm super passionate about is not only data for one organization, but actually disruption in the business models will come from sharing this data. We're going to talk about it, but it's building ecosystems. That's the number one thing that every organization should think after having a good set of data practices and, let's say, a digital culture in the organization. How do I participate to ecosystems? Because to create the new experiences for my consumers, for my clients, it will not be just me. It will be me building with data that I have, but with data that others have. And that's how value creation will be done in the future.
So as Carla mentioned, there's an enormous amount of data being generated. From the connected car alone, it's 25 gigs of data every hour. And Carlo, as you mentioned, there's enormous value being added to the supply chain on every level. But what are the risks we're seeing from this amount of data?
Risks?
The risks.
Yes. I go first, or you want?
Yeah. Please.
Well, because data are becoming this powerful tool to develop the business and to create new value for the clients in the end, because it's powerful, then it can be, well managed and be super good, or mismanaged and become a threat, actually. So from an ethical perspective, from a responsibility perspective, this is opening a new set of challenges. So we all read, for example, in the newspapers, like recently, all policymakers are now aware that, we were discussing monopoly 20 years ago, and we were one of the companies that were on the, big titles on the newspapers 20 years ago or more, because of price of market share. Today is not price or market share anymore, it's data ownership. Who owns the data, and what do they do about it? And do the customers know what they do about it? And in the end, is the value out of this data well distributed and back to the people, and not just for the businesses? So I think this is opening a new set of, let's say, reflection, and then probably regulation will come. And I think we're just at the beginning of this, new wave of reflection and action. We see that the World Economic Forum is now, looking at how we can define principles for artificial intelligence, which is, what you can build on top of your data. A lot of OECD is working on it. Governments are working on it. The tech industry is working on it as well. I think we are all defining our own principles. We have also set a group, an organized group of tech companies to discuss about this. What are the principles that we have? Let's share these principles so that we can, do level setting on our organizations, and waiting for regulation to come at European level, in the US, in Asia. Well, it's up to us to, put our own responsibility out there and be transparent on what we do about it.
I would think that, and I totally agree with what Carlo said, but from an OEM perspective, from a car manufacturer, we also have, I think, looking at this data, a very huge responsibility. In fact, I think that you talked about risks, and of course we could talk about opportunities, but from this point of risks, I think that from an OEM perspective, we have those responsibilities could be summed up by 3 words. First, security. Second, safety. And I would say last, privacy. And we must deal with all those, I would say, fields of responsibility, security and cybersecurity, because of course the data from our cars must be as safe as possible. We cannot afford a minimum risk. So it's really a very huge challenge, because cybersecurity is a never-ending story. So this one is really at the top of our priorities. The second one, of course, as I said, privacy. And we all heard about the European GDPR and all the regulation that is the framework, I would say, also that is being built in order to provide the ability to share when it is wanted, and when, of course, our customers want to share. And I think that's a key point, and Carlo said it. We are talking about new ecosystems, and these ones, by sharing data, will provide completely new opportunities. But we must respect those 3 key points: security, safety, and privacy.
Carla, I think you nailed it and gave us this wonderful framework to think about all of these 3 things. So my question for both of you is, can you delve a little deeper into the idea of privacy? Because on the one hand, data is incredibly powerful, and sharing the data unlocks all these different innovations. On the other hand, there's the need to balance customer privacy. How do you both think about customer privacy?
Let me maybe start. So I talked already about, this big power, and then responsibility, and then is the value going back to the people. I think that, because AI will build these capabilities that should help people to live better, to do better, to perform better, data and AI cannot take something back from people, but it need to add something to people. That's, I think, a very important principle. So we're talking about, for example, fairness. Do the data I have, are they really representative of the world they want to see? Are there biases inside the data? Do I need to manage better the trustability of this data? Can I trust them? Can I take decisions upon this data? So the quality, the trustability, is it solid enough that I can use it, is super important. Then transparency, I would say. If I'm doing something with data, the data belongs to someone, what am I doing about it? And what is the pedagogy I'm using so that the people know how the data is used? There is a huge need of pedagogy here because, you know, starting from kids, they start using in a native way these new tools, but do they really know what's behind? So I think that in terms of learning, we are at the beginning of the learning curve. When I say transparency, for example, now we talk about explainable AI. So what is happening is that when you train a computer to do something, well, the computer will do it quite well. And then at a certain point in time, it does it so well that we reach what is called parity. So computer vision, translation, we will read more and more different companies or university reaching parity on one human capability. We're still far from AI like we see in the movies, you know, like a computer deciding versus us, but parity on specific verticals is happening. So the reality is that when engineers are training this computer to do this, the result is sometimes so relevant that you don't understand how did it happen. Not even the developers and the engineers, the data scientists that trained the computer are incapable of explaining why is it so good. It's true. So now what we do, we start building a second system. The second system objective is just to explain why the first system is so relevant, is so true. Because if we don't build it, actually humans will not be able to understand why the algorithms are saying the truth on something which is counterintuitive for the human mind. So it goes even beyond transparency. It goes to explainability. You need to be able to explain. Otherwise, humans will not be able to cope with this new entity, which is this intelligent computer. And then, but I will come back to this later, is inclusion. We need to make sure that we are treating fairly everyone. There is a need for a democratic approach on artificial intelligence and technology in general. We need to make sure that this is providing opportunities to really everyone and not just a few.
I think that here also one example, and I totally agree also with Carlo when he talks about explainability of AI, because AI finally it's a very trendy world today, but in fact this is methodologies that are using the huge amount and the massive data we have, and we are at the momentum where in fact we have so many datas and also an increase of calculation power that enables us to really use this data through those AI methodologies. And explainability is one key point concerning automotive and autonomous driving. Because if at one hand we are not able to explain and demonstrate why the decisions that are taken by the car are the right ones, are the best ones, in fact, we won't be able to validate and bring the trust and reliability that is almost mandatory if we want those solutions, those autonomous solutions, to come to the roads. So we are also, I think almost all the car makers are leading scientific researches in order to really find ways of explaining what those deep neural networks are meaning, what they bring in terms of solutions. And in fact, yes, hybrid solutions, when you have an AI path and a more, I would say, theoretic path, is probably one of the key points. So, in fact, data, AI, can find solutions with multiple approaches, but really also and ever since with this one target, that is explaining how we use the data and how the results are, I would say, fulfilling all the requirements we want to.
Makes sense. It's very hard to get trust when people don't actually understand what's going on. Can you give me some more specific examples of how you're actually turning something that's so complicated that the data scientists don't actually understand it into something that's explainable and digestible to a consumer audience, which may not even understand what's going on?
First, I think that the first point, of course, is building the trust and reliability. And one point on this item, and I think that we will have a working session on this field also, on the validation field for autonomous driving, is also building an ecosystem where we share the mode data and all together, all the, I would say, stakeholders in this validation for autonomous mobility. And when we do that, we are also able to say, okay, it's not only one perspective from one OEM, but is a database that is built with I would say, the most average and I would say the most shared datas. And even though some of you may think that it's not possible to share datas, I think that the French ecosystem is just trying to build this validation ecosystem by sharing data for validating autonomous cars. And so building these, I would say, state-of-the-art from a database point of view means to build also a common vision on, for example, critical scenarios we all will use in order to demonstrate and validate, I would say, our solutions on autonomous field. So from an OEM and from an autonomous mobility perspective, a way of explaining is also of demonstrating that we are building a kind of state-of-the-art, and we are using it not only from one OEM perspective, but with a whole ecosystem, car manufacturers, mobility providers, and even public transportations also.
So there's a lot of value to be gained from sharing the data. And in fact, McKinsey estimates that all of this data is going to be worth $750 billion by 2030. But who owns the data, and who do you think should own the data?
That's a great question. I think, going forward, we will need to redefine this data ownership with a balance between businesses, governments, and I would say especially people. We have lost the perception of the value of the data we do represent. So it's true that today there are businesses doing business with data that belongs to me. But when I read the terms and conditions, I discover that it doesn't belong to me anymore. So I go back also to your question, how to create a trust model. I would say there are two things that are important. First is education. We're talking about billions of people today having a device that is actually quite intelligent. We're doing a lot of things through these devices, and the device is doing a lot of things that we don't understand. So I would say number one element for every government and for every company that wants to participate to his national, let's say, impact on the people, it's education. Are we telling kids and students, what are we talking about? What are we manipulating, this new oil that we are manipulating? So first is education, and the second is transparency. That's the question of responsibility of every company. This is the way I am using data. This is the way I'm storing your data. This is the number of information I will use. This is the number of information I will restrain from using. This is the guarantee I give to you, my client, my consumer, on how I'm using your data. I think that the level of transparency has a great way to go, let's say, a lot to do.
And just in addition, I think that we also have, I would say, huge challenges in changing the way we, from an education point of view and from the skills preparations. Because today when we see the needs we will have towards those data new businesses, we are also having huge needs of new skills. And we are all, I think, also fighting for those very specific and rare care skills. And I think that the overall education system should also much earlier intend and share what are the challenges of this data and what are, in fact, what will make the world of tomorrow and how we will use that. And I think it's also a way of preparing the future by enhancing our skills through our education programs.
So in the name of transparency, I'm just going to push a little harder and ask once again, how are you thinking about data ownership? What's the ideal state in the future for figuring this out?
Well, I think I've answered before. So I said we need total transparency of every company on how we are using data of our clients and citizens. I think that the terms and conditions of our services has to be super clear, very easy to find. If somebody wants to understand, we don't need to spend hours to understand where to find the information. It has to be right there, has to be understandable, and I can understand how my data is used. And if I want to opt out, I need to be able to opt out. The opt-in, opt-out concept is super important as well. Are we giving consumers the choice on how the data is used? So it goes back to transparency and options.
I think that this is the major liberty, in fact, freedom to choose if
Yes.
they want to, of course, share and give their data or not. But this freedom needs to, I would say, stay to, of course, our customers.
And finally, what is the opportunity cost of not figuring this out? What are the tremendous advantages that we're all going to be able to gain from the innovation that this data provides and enables us to do?
You want to?
Well, I would like to highlight one element that is very important to me and the company I work for, which is inclusion. There was a Harvard Business Review article I was reading today and I published on LinkedIn this morning about people with disabilities. I used to know statistics which says 20% of the human being have a disability forever or in one moment of their life. The new statistics that HBR was publishing today is 30%, which is just huge. It's 1 out of 3 persons have or will have a disability in their life. So I think that when we look at what technology has done for us today, it's already a lot. I mean, we do a lot with and through technology, especially at work, a little bit on entertainment and other elements of our life. But going forward, we're going to touch the human sphere even more completely, I would say. Health, well-being, mobility, we're talking about here in these 3 days. A lot of things will change because technology is helping. Then we should see this as a big opportunity to say, okay, for this 30% of colleagues, friends, family members that maybe have a disability, what does it mean? Are we creating a world where health and mobility and the experiences will help everyone to feel really included? Are we living in the same world? So I will give a very simple example. We've done this, a colleague of ours that is blind did this application based on cognitive services that, he's wearing these glasses and with the camera, the glasses would tell him, this is the context in front of you. If he's in a meeting, the agent would say, you have 3 people in front of you, they're looking at you, there is 2 women, 1 man, they're concentrated, one is laughing. All things that for somebody who can see are normal, and this is creating an agent that will give a context to somebody who usually doesn't have. If he's in a park, he can say, kids playing football, and the agent will tell him. So in mobility, it means that it creates a huge opportunity of thinking differently on what are the experiences for somebody that is moving in the world through devices, but also with a digital companion that can help that experience to be easier, more valuable for them.
It's quite difficult to add something because Carlo said almost everything on this topic. No, I would just maybe sum it up on the way that from our perspective, it's a huge opportunity of enhancing those mobility experiences, wherever they are, autonomous ones, not still or automated ones for the first steps, but bringing value, adding value, I would say, to our customers. And of course, I think that it opens new wide ranges of opportunities, but enhancing and creating new experiences of mobility is really one of the major topics we will have to tackle all together.
Thank you so much, Carlo and Carla, for your clear thinking on such a complicated topic. Please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.